Welcome to another episode of Aragone and Advisors, where expertise meets strategy. Today we're going to tackle a very important topic, one that is, really close to our hearts, which is caring for aging parents and loved ones. So we all know that it's a time where we need to make very important decisions for their care, important decisions that have to do with finances and real estate sometimes. So we have with us today Dwight Brown. He's the owner of Home Helpers, which is an in-home caregiving business. And Dwight has been doing this for over 25 years. And he's just an amazing person that I think everybody should listen to when it comes to in-home care. Dwight, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Of course, it's a pleasure to have you. So we're going to talk about things that are options, I always say, when caring about parents. And one of those, obviously, is caring for parents while they are independent, as much independent as possible in their own homes, and what Home Helpers can provide in terms of support. The other one is when we have them transitioning into an independent care facility or a senior community or a memory care facility, things like that. And the third one would be one that we're seeing a big trend right now, which is parents building ADUs, which are accessory dwelling units in their home, to have them come into their property. So now they can keep an eye on them and they have a little bit of in-home care, but they also do the majority of the work. So tell us a little bit of each service that your company provides, how you can support them in those three avenues.
Absolutely. So when it comes to parents aging, there's a spectrum of care that can be provided. A lot of the people that I help, I'll divide it into two groups. One is it's immediately after a medical emergency.
Okay.
Mom or dad are in the hospital, fell and broke a hip, had a stroke, or some other acute issue.
Okay.
And they are going to need help immediately after that event.
Perfect.
And then the other group that I help is people that they're going to need chronic care over time because of memory or weakness or fatigue or fall risk. So there's people that I'm helping immediately after an event, or there's people that I'm helping where the family has thought about it for a while and it's finally time. Correct. Okay. Now, when it comes to the people that are coming out of the hospital after an acute event, my first advice is always talk to your doctor about an extended stay
at the rehab.
Correct. Immediately after the hospital, Medicare will cover a rehab for about 2 weeks.
Oh, that's
perfect. And I always tell people, talk to the doctor, say that mom or dad is potentially a fall risk, and they'll keep you at a rehab for a couple of weeks. And a rehab is like a hospital hotel.
Okay.
You get a little nicer of a spot. There are physical therapists that will come by. You're under 24-hour care there. And I recommend this because from a price point of view, it's a great option. You get 2 weeks for mom and dad to get stronger, to get more capable, and then by the time they come home, hopefully they're able to stand up. Yep, and you've got 2 weeks of full-time care that was paid for by Medicare.
Correct.
So generally when people call me right after a hospitalization, I recommend talk to the doctor about that. Now, after that, when they come home, they still may want some temporary care just to see how things are going. Especially if mom or dad are having trouble standing up and getting to the bathroom and they're worried about falling. And so what I do is I provide caregivers. So a caregiver is essentially like another member of the family.
Okay.
We can do just about anything that a family member can do with some legal limitations.
Okay.
Right? We're not allowed to give injections.
Okay.
We're not allowed to draw blood.
Okay.
We're not allowed to take medication out of the bottle. Those things all require either a license or a family member.
Okay.
So, but we can help in just about every other way.
Okay.
So, you mentioned, so one of those would be very temporary care.
Correct.
We have a caregiver that can come in for a couple of weeks.
Hours.
Yeah, and in fact, a typical one, I just helped someone several weeks ago in Newport Beach, where the husband was coming out of the hospital. He had gone to a rehab. He was doing very well. The wife was just worried, he was a big and tall guy, that she was not going to be strong enough, and she didn't know what his strength level was going to be. So we had a caregiver there for actually about 36 hours. We had a caregiver go in for about 12 hours, and then another one for 12 hours, and another for 12 hours. And after that, the wife felt like, hey, he's doing great, we don't need help anymore. Okay. Let's talk about that other scenario. I'll get a call that says, we're noticing mom is a little wobbly, a little weak. She had a fall a couple of weeks ago. We would really like someone here. And so we'll send somebody in for the hours that care is needed the most. Usually that's in the morning. Usually from 10 to 2 or something like that a few times a week.
And that makes so much sense, because sometimes they need to go do something and you need somebody watching them while you can go and pick up medications, you can go and do grocery shopping. So it's a great opportunity to give you a little bit of freedom while you're caring for somebody and you don't have that risk of them falling, doing something that could endanger
And we call that respite care, which is where we're coming in just to give the family a break so that they can get out and do other things, and then we're there to take care of mom or dad during the times that the rest of the family is. So we talked about people that come out of the hospital and just need temporary care to potentially make sure that person is safe, help the family out. Those first few days can be very tough. Then we talked about people that maybe just need a break. We call that respite care. Then there's people that they're living independently alone, but the family then feels like, or the person can feel like, I just need some help. And so we can be in every day for a few hours. We can be there every day, all day. Really depends on what they want. I always recommend when it's a new thing. Oftentimes mom or dad might be a little resistant. We're not used to having somebody here. We're very independent. I recommend start small. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 to 2. And we come in the morning when people are having the most, they're stiff, you're a little weaker, and we can come in and help with breakfast. We can help with laundry. We can drive mom or dad to their appointments during that time. I always talk about, a big one is changing your bed sheets. When you're younger and you're mobile, changing bed sheets isn't easy. Well, it's easy and it's never fun. That fitted sheet is always a pain for everybody, right? But when you're 85 years old, that fitted sheet is a real nightmare. And taking that sheet and putting it in a basket and carrying that basket to the laundry room, that's dangerous, right? If you're unstable. So we go from basically that short-term care to then eventually we have clients where it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we can be there providing care.
And you know what, you cover something so important and people don't realize until they are in that position. My mom had hip surgery, and she needed 3 people per day, for 8 hours each to come in and do all those things. And that was a game changer, because as much as we as kids want to be there, they are adults. They don't want their kids changing them. They don't want their kids taking them to the bathroom. And same thing, I had the same situation with my father-in-law that also broke his hip. And, I would help him up to the bathroom, and then he would say, can you give me some privacy? And you're standing outside saying, please don't fall. Don't fall. And so it's so hard. And I always say, as much as we want to be there for them, and we are there for them, we need an expert that is not a family member. And then as more needs come up, they are now used to that person.
Whenever I do networking or educational seminars, I often start off with the kind of funny question for everybody in the room. I said, raise your hand if you think about your retirement, and everybody keeps their hand raised. And I say, raise your hand if you imagine your retirement being a nursing home. And just about everybody puts their hand down.
Oh, of course.
And if they don't put their hand down, it's okay. Imagine you're living at home and you want your kids changing your underwear, helping you wipe after you go to the bathroom or in the shower. And everybody puts their hands. None of us want our kids taking care of our biological needs as we get older. And that's a big thing that we can help with, right? Where we add that level of, it's a professional person that you don't have to feel like it's a family member seeing you.
And that brings me to what the trend that we're having right now, where a lot of parents are saying, okay, Mom, Dad, your house doesn't fit your needs anymore. You can't be going up and down the stairs. You can't be falling off, the stairs. we're going to sell your house and we're going to move you into our property and build you an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit, or convert the detached garage into a unit for you. And now we have direct access to you every moment, but then we hire somebody to come in and do those chores, do those things.
I've helped a number of people that have, they used to be a casita.
Yes. We call it the guest house, the mother-in-law quarters.
An ADU, a mother-in-law suite, correct.
Yes.
I've helped a number of people in that exact scenario. And it's, here in California, it's also a good option because you are investing in your property as well, right?
Absolutely.
And if there is a point where mom and dad need full-time care somewhere more intensive than there, then you have something that you can use for a rental or
I agree.
So I think it's a very good option.
And they have been changing the rules where now it's easier. Everybody can build their ADU. Before it was very complex.
Absolutely.
And you had to have a very large lot. And Yorba Linda was over 17,000 square feet lot to be able to have a guest house. Right now, things have changed and they're allowing everybody almost to be able to do that. And it makes all the sense in the world because now you can combine two families and they each have their own space and you're caring for your aging parents. And at the same time, if at some point they're no longer there, you can rent it as an income.
It's a journey. Yeah, it's a journey. In the early to middle stages, I would say in the early stages, mom and dad probably at home is very right.
Independent.
In a home with a lot of stairs, that's going to end sooner. I see a lot of families that move downstairs in homes, and sometimes that's not practical. In those middle stages, having something like an ADU is great, where you are saving money on housing. You're investing in your own property rather than paying for a senior community of some kind. There is a point at which that if the work required is too much, even from there, you'll want to go to somewhere that's got more
and that also
care.
is where you can help them with the transition. And I always say that is when you're looking at, okay, we have a lot of our elderlies that are having either dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson. And so now they need medical, they need memory care facility, they need more hands-on on the medical side.
I've helped people, and again, caregiving can be an option that goes from out of the hospital for 10 years until end of life.
Correct.
It can be, but that's a very expensive approach. Caregiving is the most expensive form of care for seniors. I have to be honest about it. And when people call me, I tell them right away. And the reason that it's the most expensive form of care is because in California, the land is expensive, yes. The labor is more expensive. And so when you choose to have a caregiver, you are choosing to have one person cared for by one person, and it's a one-to-one ratio. If you move into something like a board-in care, you've got 5 to 10 seniors and you have maybe 2 caregivers, and you're dividing the labor, which is the most expensive cost now, 10 ways or 5 ways or something like that. Now, we do provide caregiving to people until the end. I just helped someone who passed away, was on care 24 hours a day during the end. And I'm very open with people when they call and say, I think we need 24-hour care. The first words out of my mouth are, this is very expensive.
But they do it. We just closed a property in Newport Beach, and the homeowner was 91. She passed away in the property. And same thing, she was having home care. And they actually had a reverse mortgage to help pay for that. Some people are able to do that because they have a lot of equity in their homes. And so that's the avenue they take. And that's totally fine. I always say the equity in the house is to care for your aging parents if you don't want to sell. If you decide to sell, then you have that equity cash at hand and you don't have a mortgage.
Even with a reverse mortgage, you retain the title of the property. So you don't lose the property and whatever equity's left, you sell the house. Now, we've kind of stumbled into the how do people pay for this questions. One of the most common questions I get when people call. Generally, caregiving in the state of California, at least in Southern California now, costs about $40 an hour.
I was going to say that. $40
it's about $40 an hour. It costs more for shorter chunks of time.
Correct.
So if someone calls me and says, we just want someone to come out for 90 minutes to take a shower.
Correct.
We'll actually charge more per hour.
Okay.
And the reason,
makes sense.
The reason for that is it's difficult that the employees do not want to drive.
Correct.
My caregivers aren't going to want to drive 30 minutes to
Just
someone's
for-
house,
yes.
be there for an hour, and
Correct.
then drive home.
No.
They've spent an hour driving. So I persuade them, as when people call me, I often say I have to bribe them. I
Yes.
pay them
Yes.
more. I'll
Yes.
say, great, for 90 minutes. So we scale the pricing up under 4 hours. Over 4 hours, it's about $40 an hour. Now, different agencies are different on this.
Correct.
And personally, my agency does not charge overtime.
Okay.
After 8 hours or 9 hours in the state of California, the caregiver makes time and a half.
Oh.
And I actually absorb that cost as kind of a volume discount.
Oh, wow.
So this is part of why live-in care, we call it live-in care or 24-hour care, is so expensive. An employee gets there, let's say at midnight, they work till 8 a.m., they're making their standard wage. From 8 a.m. to the following midnight, they're on time and a half. And so that's why live-in care, even if they're living there for 5 or 6 days straight, even if you're giving them a room, they have to be making overtime. And we can have a whole separate discussion about the laws.
That's why I say when you hire a company like you can have different people come at different times and divide it.
Correct.
You know?
There's different, now believe it or not, cost-wise, it comes out to about the same.
The same.
And I'll explain why. So we talked about paying for it. So most people are paying out of pocket. In my agency, I have 3/4 of my clients are paying out of pocket. The remaining 25% have either long-term care insurance, which is wonderful. It's harder and harder to get these days. And long-term care insurance policies vary greatly.
Yes.
If people are interested in caregiving and they have long-term care, call me. I have advice immediately about how to contact the company, the questions you ask the company. So the first one is people pay out of pocket. Second one is long-term care. The third one is veterans. So veterans, believe it or not, can get caregiving covered through 3 different programs. And like everything government, it's complicated. This is another call me scenario.
That is so important because so many people have no idea that veterans can get assistance when it comes to home care.
The VA is actually wonderful when it comes to home care. And this is one of those things where the government set aside, I'm going to make up a number, $1 billion and put it. Yeah, Congress said we're going to put aside $1 billion to take care of our veterans and very few people know about it. And the utilization rate is under 1% because it's so unknown.
I did not know that.
I'm not allowed to advertise the service. I'm allowed to educate, but we're not allowed to advertise. Yes, but I'm allowed to educate. And so there are 3 programs for veterans. One is to get a caregiver for the veteran.
Okay.
The second one is to get a caregiver for respite. So the veteran is taking care of their spouse and the veteran needs a break.
Oh.
And then the third one is called the aid and attendance pension. And that one is just a check. And those each have, the first 2 that I mentioned do not have an income requirement. You can make any,
as long as you're a veteran.
You can have any assets, any level, and you can qualify. And again, this is one of those, look online or reach out to me for details. The aid and attendance pension is both income limited.
So do you have 120,000?
It's like 120,000 in the bank.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And then number 2, you have to have served during wartime.
Oh.
The other 2 do not have that.
Okay.
There were other little disclaimers, and those are things that. So when it comes to paying for it, cash, long-term care, veterans care. You already mentioned one, which is reverse mortgage. So you use the equity in your home, and essentially, it's like taking out a mortgage that you never pay.
Correct.
You get the money, and then the interest accrues. And then the final option, if you have life insurance. And you're 85 years old, you probably are not going to need that life insurance anymore.
So you can...
Yeah, you can do what's called a surrender value.
Yes.
You can reach out to the company and say, does my policy have a surrender value? And the insurance company may give you 3/4, some amount,
of
right?
the value.
Some amount of the value of your life insurance
and
that you can cash out.
Correct.
And you can use it for care. Now, there are 2 other options that I'm going to put last. Medicare, which everybody over 65 has Medicare, does not cover caregiving.
No.
Traditional Medicare does not. There are some health plans, Medicare Advantage plans, that will offer caregiving for a short time after a hospitalization.
Yes.
2 weeks of caregiving at home. Those are part of a Medicare Advantage plan. I think SCAN Health Plan might be doing it. Anthem Blue Cross might be doing it. There are some others. This is when you'd have to reach out to your Medicare Advantage plan and ask. And then the final one is Medicaid.
Okay.
So Medicaid here in California, called Medi-Cal, is the low income and disabled version of Medicare. And it has in-home care as a benefit. I know very little about that because I'm not certified with
that.
Medicaid. My understanding of it is that the reimbursements rates are somewhat low. I believe there are options also where you can hire a family member, and the family member can be paid to provide the care. But again, I know very, very little about this,
My thing with this has always been you need to plan, right?
Absolutely.
We all have parents that are aging. We know they're going to get there to a point where they need not only us making the decision, but somebody really being there next to them. I always say our generation, it's what I call the sandwich generation,
yes,
right?
Absolutely.
We're caring for aging parents. We're caring for helping our kids, not caring, but helping our kids in many instances. And some have little kids, right? And so you can't be running for everybody, and you need to, as you plan on your parents, make sure you make the right decisions that will give the family peace of mind.
Absolutely.
Who you hire matters. Compassionate. I always say not all companies are made the same. Some companies, like we were talking the other day, Dwight, your company cares. You care. You have provided an invaluable time for them where you have made no money, but it was just recommendations and being there for them and educating them and giving them options. And maybe at that point, the option was they need to go into a memory care facility. I cannot help them, but you spend the time to help them.
I've had, and thank you for saying that, first of all. And I've had a number of clients over the years. In-home care is not the option for everybody. Financially, it's expensive. In addition to that, I had a client about a year ago who reached out to me, and her husband was in a board-and-care. Yes. And a board-and-care is a residential home that's been converted to take care of seniors.
Correct.
And it's a very good and affordable option.
Yeah, and normally they have 5 bedrooms, and some have an bathroom inside, some shared bathrooms.
Yep, correct. It's somewhere between 5 or 6 seniors in a 5-bedroom home. You have basically round-the-clock care there from potentially a nurse and a caregiver.
Correct.
And from a pricing point of view, $6,000 to $7,000 a month, which is really not bad.
No.
In contrast, a memory care unit could be $20,000.
Correct.
A caregiver 24 hours a day is about $30,000. So so I went out to a client, I believe it was about a year ago. Her husband was a veteran, in fact, and so the VA was helping for paying for the board-and-care. And she wanted to bring him home. She said, he's 90 years old, wife was 85. I really would like to have him home. And I talked to some of her family members, and the family members said, we think this is a really bad idea. And I actually agreed. It would have been wonderful for my business to take on a $30,000 a month client, right?
But you don't do it for those reasons.
It's not all about the money, right?
No.
In this scenario, here you've got an 85-year-old woman who is now adjusted to living alone, going and visiting her husband who needs a lot of care. Moving him back home is traumatic for both him and her.
I agree.
And then you've got 24-hour care. Someone is taking care of husband, but that means you've got people coming into your house and going in and out of your home. You're going to be mama bear probably, right?
Yes.
And you're going to be concerned. Has he eaten? Does he need to shower? Do you, the caregiver, need anything to drink, right? It's going to be for someone that's getting older. You're better off both financially and for her health,
Well, I say that, there's so many different dynamics going on, right? Obviously, the very first one is the financial aspect of it, right? I always tell my clients, if your parents are in a great position financially, let them live in the house for as long as they can because they feel independent, they feel worthy. They put somebody that can come in and take care of them for X amount of hours or full day, whatever the case might be, and use the equity in the house for that. If that is the option. We have a lot of high net worth individuals that they have the ability.
And mom and dad have earned it. They've earned that equity. They bought that house. It's their money.
So I say that. Then we have clients. We just assisted a client in Rancho Palos Verdes. She was 91. She was very much, smart woman. She knew what she was doing. She wanted to move into a senior community because of all the social activities that happen in the senior community, and you don't feel alone in a house with a home care. So that is an option too. We sold the property, got her an extraordinary amount of money that would go to offset her home, her living cost. So that's a second option, right? But then you have others that are not on the higher end, that are middle class. And as we know, it's very expensive. And the home care system is the transition, like you said. It's a transition period. And we need to understand what's involved in that. And again, make sure we make that decision knowing where we're putting our parents. Because I have heard horror stories, and we
So
were
have I.
talking
Yes,
about
yeah.
that. And who you hire. Go check how they live. Spend time there.
Yeah.
Look at the facility. Look at what they're offering. I had this case, and it was so interesting. This lady, she called us and she said, I want to move into a senior community. I've lost my husband 10 years ago. My kids don't understand. I don't like being alone all the time. I've been here alone in this house for 10 years. I want to move into a senior community where they take me to get my nails done, my hair done. And would you talk to my kids? And I had to sit down with the 3 adults and explain to them why it was important for mom to move there. And we ended up selling the house, which sometimes they don't want to do that because they're waiting for the step up in basis so that there's no, and so, but at the end of the day, it's her money. It's how she wants to spend her money, and whatever is left, it goes to the kids. So estate planning goes hand in hand sometimes with making these decisions.
We've talked about, you've touched on so many things here. One of them is everybody should have an estate plan.
Correct.
It doesn't matter how old you are. I got into this business and pretty soon after went and did an estate plan because
I agree.
Because I've worked with a couple of families where they
had none.
They didn't think they were going to pass. It happens, and what a nightmare. Then you go into probate. Now the government is taking a cut of everything. You don't want to end up there. Everybody should have an estate plan, number one. Number two, we're dealing with people, and people are different, and everybody is different. There are people where staying at home is the healthiest and safest thing for them, and then there's other people that say, no, I don't really want to stay at home. I'm social. I'd rather go into a senior community. Every person is different, and every situation is different. And so this world working with seniors, there's no cookie cutter answers for this. A lot of people get into, I think senior care has become a kind of a popular business, so to speak, in the last 5 or 6 years. I see a lot of advertisements for getting into this business, and you realize it's not a normal business. It's not cookie cutter. Every case that you deal with is very, very different.
I agree. Families are different. Family needs are different.
The dynamics are different.
100%. And one of the things we always tell clients is not only estate planning in terms of, who's going to inherit what. It's also a power of attorney on your aging parents, where you're going to be able to make decisions if they can no longer make decisions. I mean, how many times we see that they fail, they go into the hospital, they have the surgery, now they're being put in anesthesia, and they don't recover from that anesthesia. Sometimes they're being put on life supports. Things that can go wrong, if you plan, will not go wrong. If you don't plan, sometimes they do go wrong. And now all of a sudden we have things that now you're on a conservatorship.
Yeah, and that's not what you want. You don't want probate. You just made me think of a wonderful idea. Maybe we should establish estate planning day nationwide.
Yes, I agree.
I think what's difficult is bringing up that conversation.
I agree.
But I'll tell you, having that conversation at a younger age, when it seems like more of an academic discussion, is easier than when someone's
it's at the end of life, and they don't want to feel the kids are making decisions for them.
I was taking one of my clients to a kidney dialysis, and then he had recently been diagnosed with some problems. And I'm in the car thinking, how do I ask this man casually if he has an estate plan that is without me suggesting that he's about to go?
Yes.
And that conversation is so much easier to have when you're healthy. Honestly, everybody should do it early and update that estate plan. The laws are constantly changing. Your assets and your situations are changing.
And I always say, people don't know what they don't know. Our job is to educate them. That's why we do this podcast. That's why we do this podcast and these different episodes, so that people can understand, okay, I'm going through this right now. My parents are perfectly fine, But who knows in 10 years? Who knows in 15
Yep.
years? So why not plan now, have the conversation with the family, have the conversation with the attorney, see how you can set up things that it's easier for everybody. When those days come, you're going to be thankful you plan ahead.
It's one less thing to worry about, that's
Yes.
for sure. And everybody that calls me is going through a life event,
Oh,
a
I agree.
traumatic. Every call I get is either, I think 90% of the calls I get are from a family member. It's
Yes.
the son or the daughter, and they have been home for Thanksgiving or Christmas or Easter, and they see that something has changed with mom or dad.
Yes.
Lost weight, the house isn't looking so good anymore, weakness, instability, or they've just had a major surgery or a stroke or a fall or a big diagnosis. So 90% of my phone calls are, don't worry, I've been doing this a long time. Here's all of your options. Here's what you need to think about. The more of that you can take off your plate by doing things 10 years in advance with an estate plan really make a big difference.
So 2 things I want to point out. First one is, like we said, plan ahead. That's one of the things at Aragonian Advisors we keep, saying, plan ahead. The second one is you have to understand that there's a lot of people out there taking advantage of elderlies. A lot of people are taking advantage of them. They go, they prey on them. They want to take their assets. And they see that they're frail, and sometimes they're having memory issues. And if we're not there to protect them, somebody else will take advantage of them. So it's super important. 2 things I always say: do check-ups on them. I've heard many times where I'm talking with my clients, and they say, Paula, we need to sell the house. Mom died, and it was a hoarder situation. And I asked them, I said, have you not been visiting mom? And they're like, no, she always wanted to meet at a coffee or at a restaurant or come home. She never wanted me to go. Well, that's a red flag. So if you have that, go check on them. The second one is not only check on them on how they're living, but look for little clues where you might need somebody to step in and help them clean up the house. Set up a weekly, time.
Yeah, and housekeeping, whenever people reach out to me about caregiving, by the way, housekeeping is something we can do a small amount of.
Agree.
But from a legal point of view, actually, I'm not licensed as a housekeeping business. Most of the people that I use have caregiving. They're doing, picking up cans and bottles that have been left around.
Yes.
But then a housekeeper comes in for the bigger housekeeping.
Correct.
And it's really not that expensive. You mentioned hoarding. Hoarding is one of the things that I see every 6 months. I go to visit somebody. I get a phone call about caregiving. I go to the home, and there's a hoarding situation.
Yes.
And it's extremely dangerous for
them.
the senior.
Yes.
There's trip hazards everywhere, fall hazards all over the place. In addition, I cannot send a caregiver there.
No.
Because I'm not allowed to have an employee in a dangerous environment.
I
right?
agree.
And hoarding, eventually, the value of your house decreases because you end up with water damage that nobody notices. Where this leak was hidden behind all of these boxes.
We've seen horror stories where you walk in and you're like, this was so unhealthy for them.
Yeah.
But nobody knew.
Absolutely.
Nobody knew.
Yeah, and so sometimes I have caregivers that are almost essentially doing wellness checks.
Yes.
Where family all lives out of state, and I'll have caregivers that stop in for 90 minutes, like I mentioned before, just to see, is everything okay, tidy up just a little bit, make sure they're safe and healthy. And we do that, again, it's hard to do that. From a labor point of view, the market's very tight. People don't want to work 90 minutes. But what I'll do is I'll have them stop on their way to somewhere else. So they have a job that starts at 10 a.m. and I'll say, do you mind add Mrs. Jones to your schedule every day at 8:30 a.m.
Perfect.
The employee loves that because they're getting a little extra work. The family's very happy because they just want someone to check in.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
I love that idea because it's so important. A little bit goes so far, right? Just doing that checkup on them, making sure they're fine. If something is off, then you can make adjustments early on. And now let's talk about one more thing that I think everybody talks about. And it's not hiring a company, but hiring hiring those caregivers that come into the house they end up trying to get the old person to marry them, to take their assets.
Yeah.
We hear this all the time. We see it. It
Yeah.
happens. It's not that it's something that it's talked, but it doesn't happen. It happens. We've seen case where the caregiver comes, she's from another country, she comes in, she'll say, no, you can hire me, I'll live here.
Yeah.
And then
You mentioned the scams.
Yes.
And this is just, a different, so I see scams where there's obviously the ones that everybody's aware of now. Phone calls, internet, the loving scams.
Yes.
I've had caregivers arrive and they'll call me and say, Mrs. Jones says that someone was here today and offered to repaint her eaves for $10,000. Just, outrageous. And that's part of, you have a caregiver there, they report back to me and to the family. So there's external threats that, seniors are being preyed upon constantly now,
all day.
especially, phone calls, internet, and
send me the money.
I'm sorry for this tangent, but tariffs are a popular topic right now.
Yes.
And I realized the other day that I would be a total fan of tariffing the countries that are most responsible for scamming seniors.
That's a great point.
If the president were to reach out to a couple of countries that I can think, and I'm not going to mention, and say, great, if you don't want tariffs, stop the senior calls, the scam call centers. I think
agree.
they're a plague.
Oh, I agree.
So, but then there are threats that are from people you bring into the home.
I agree.
Now, as an agency, we are licensed through social services. So I have a license with social services. My business has a license with social services, and everybody I hire is licensed through the California
and they go
Department of
through
Social
background checks,
the state
and
background
everything.
checks them. In fact, they background monitor them. So if I
Yes.
hire somebody and they have a clean background, but then they go out and get a DUI, let's
Yes.
say, right? The state notifies me,
Yes.
and then I have to stop, terminate
Yes.
their employment, right? When you hire people that are under the table, essentially,
Correct.
Craigslist, or I heard from a neighbor,
Yes.
I'm sure some are wonderful. I hope, as a lover of humankind, I
Yes.
hope that 95% of them are wonderful and that only 5% are bad. I don't know what the number is, but the stories are there. I've heard many stories, and some of them, they really range. Some of the stories are just bad people. They come in, they start a relationship, they end up, in either a marriage or
taking money.
or just being given things.
Yes.
A common one that I hear is, I don't drive anymore. I have this car. Take my
Take the
car.
car.
Right? Take the car. Or I'm going to add you to my estate plan and my will. Or
Yes.
It's Christmas time. Here's $1,000,
Yes.
$10,000 bonus.
And remember, they have the checkbook there.
Yes.
How many times we hear that, they didn't know what they were doing, but the caregiver was writing checks.
Well, it also starts with caregivers talking about, I'm having trouble with money. My rent is due, and then it's just, here's a little of this, and as an agency, those are my employees. It's forbidden for my employees to talk
about what
with
they
their
need.
seniors about any of their financial problems or anything else. And we are not allowed, I mentioned that we're not allowed to draw blood, or that we're not allowed to help with anything financial. We're not allowed to be balancing checkbooks or paying bills. As an agency that's monitored through social services, if an employee of mine, if a caregiver of mine gets in that kind of trouble, that's elder abuse, and they'll end up losing their license and being charged with elder abuse as well. So there are examples that are just malicious people, but then there's also cases where people are acting innocently but naively.
Okay.
I get a lot of phone calls for people that say, I've had a caregiver here. We want a live-in caregiver. We're going to pay her $5,000 a month to take care of mom or dad, and we're giving her a room. In the state of California, that $5,000 a month plus rent does not compensate for minimum. It doesn't compensate for minimum wage.
No.
And so that caregiver encounters a labor attorney, or the caregiver slips and falls and gets an attorney, and it turns into
a nightmare.
You owe me past due overtime. You owe me past due minimum wage. You weren't paying my 401k and my workers' comp and everything else. And then you have these major lawsuits where you save some money every month, and now you're out $500,000. I was recently told a story of a gentleman who had a caregiver that he really enjoyed and appreciated. Probably a wonderful relationship. The last 2 years, the last 2 months of his life, he was not in a mental state where he was able to pay the employee anymore. So the employee went unpaid for 2 months, and this was an under-the-table caregiver. and then the gentleman passes away. The employee hasn't been compensated for 2 months, so he sues the family and the estate for $250,000 to $300,000 for 2 months of wages. But it's penalties, it's punitive damages, and then they start looking at, well, was he paying all of these other things that are required in California?
Yeah, that's why I say you have to be so careful, because you're navigating things that are first unknown, second emotional, and third financial.
Yes.
And so how do you do these on a way that it's safe for your parents, that it's, gives you peace of mind, that it has the, emotional factor where you're doing the best for your parents and you're not getting in trouble? Because sometimes what I call is good intentions, bad presentation. So you might have a good intention, and you were talking about, I have to think 95% of the people are good and only 5 are bad. But that 5%, when it comes to your family, becomes your 100%, right?
And those 5% ruin a lot of lives.
That's what I'm saying.
There's a lot of trauma, a lot of damage.
We had one case where the caregiver married him, and he ended up dying a year and a month after they married. So now she's entitled to the social. We couldn't get her out of the house.
So that's another issue.
You have to hire an elder abuse attorney. You have to go to court. There's so many things. So I tell my clients all the time, check on mom and dad. Be careful who you put in their home. That's why we were so happy to have you today, so that you can.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, you can put. You can give your intake of what really happens.
I'm not a lawyer, but there are a lot of legal in the state of California as well. If you take in a caregiver and you move that caregiver in, getting that caregiver out is you're going through an eviction process.
Now you have a tenancy.
Whereas when you go through an agency like mine, you are employing a third party.
And you employ them.
I am bonded, I'm licensed, I'm insured, I have workers' compensation. I know the rules when it comes to overtime pay and things like that. Caregivers, now we do have what's called live-in caregivers, where the caregivers stay, but they stay for several days and then they leave. And we're not allowed to trade rent charges for living there. We know all of the rules, and those are in place because obviously I don't want to get sued. No. I don't want to get anybody else sued. We follow all the rules.
So one of the things we always say is we work with families, we work with corporate trustees, we work with professional fiduciaries. And so do you. So you work with families, you work with elderly, and you also work with disabled, right?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm currently helping 2 people that have autism that have recently left the family, living independently, but they need help during certain times of the day. I've helped a number of cases where people were permanently disabled at birth and are in a conservatorship type of situation where
special needs trust,
where they have special needs trust, correct, and then we've been entrusted to be there taking care of the person for 8, 12, 24 hours a day potentially.
And one other thing that I always say that people don't understand, sometimes families say, no, I'll do it. And what happens is 2 things. The one that is giving the care, it's so emotionally involved that normally their health suffers.
Absolutely.
Second, the parents, when they reach certain age and they're having a little bit of an issue with dementia or memory loss, they start getting upset at the person that is providing them the care. And sometimes they start saying things that are not true, or they start getting upset because parents don't want the kids to tell them what to do at that age. So it changes the roles, right?
Absolutely.
And they don't like it. And all of a sudden, a relationship between a mother and a daughter that was perfect for so many years, all of a sudden, the mother becomes very aggressive towards the daughter who's giving the care. So put all those things into consideration when you are making decisions, because you don't want a relationship to be broken. Yeah. And we also hear stories where they're like, my daughter's taking my money. And it could be true. It could be true. But sometimes they're seeing things that are not true. And so now you have a family issue.
Yeah, you're touching on a lot of things. So in the healthcare world, caregivers, family caregivers, generally fare worse than the person they are taking care
Correct.
of. So Medicare has seen this and is now starting to offer respite care
Yes.
as a benefit for the family member,
Yes.
because in fact the person they're taking care of does better, the caregiver does worse.
worse.
It's very, very, very taxing. It's very hard. Alzheimer's and dementia are heartbreaking.
Yes.
It's such a difficult situation. When it comes to being a family caregiver for someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, one of the parts of that can be there are different. Everybody progresses through those conditions
stages.
differently.
Yeah, but
Some people get very aggressive
I
and
agree.
very accusatory. Other people become loving and
Yes.
childlike. And it can be very difficult when you're saying it can be targeted at family members more than everybody else. In addition, as a caregiver, this person is someone that I hate to say I don't know, but there is an ability to be a little bit separated.
Correct.
When it's a daughter or a husband or wife, you're looking at this person that you've known for 30 or 40 or 50 years. And it's hard for you to realize this person isn't the same person anymore. And so it's very hard to then be like, Dad, snap out of it, Dad,
Yes.
right? Whereas when a caregiver comes in, they know this is a person with Alzheimer's or dementia.
and they're trained.
That's exactly
They're
it.
trained.
It's very hard for us to turn that off and not see mom or dad anymore, and sometimes get frustrated by mom, come on.
One of the things I always say, I'm a certified senior residential expert. I work with seniors. I see those things. I took courses on being able to understand them, and sometimes I'm the one educating the daughter or the son who's caring for them and say, no, don't engage there. Just acknowledge and move them out from there, because you don't want to get into an argument with them. They get stuck on something, right?
And you can't win that argument.
No,
Yeah.
you will not, and you will make things worse because you agitate them, right? So I always say, when you hire a professional that knows how to deal with seniors in those stages, it makes all the difference in the world. So bring the expert. Let them be the one giving the care at those moments in life. Life goes through cycles and stages, right? Today they might be in perfect shape. You're planning for the future. Know the options, know the experts, interview them. See who's the right person to walk next to them throughout their last years.
And even in caregiving, it's not one size fits all.
No.
We may start with a client in a case where you need a caregiver that's simply there for companionship,
Correct.
helping around the house, driving to appointments. And then you need someone who has a better ability to do showering and bathing. They're stronger and have a different technique. And then maybe you progress to somebody who has special experience with memory care. So in the caregiving world, we adapt as times change. To the different people as they progress through. Or I always tell people there's a spectrum of care that we provide.
Yeah,
sometimes it's very, very simple and basic, and sometimes it's extremely intensive.
Complex.
Yeah.
Yes. And one of the things I want to point out in closing is, find the true experts. Read the reviews. Go see how they interact. You have to do the work, because if not, the price you're going to pay, and it's so hard. I see people make mistakes, and then I see people being taken advantage.
Real estate and caregiving are similar in that if you make a mistake, the mistake is
very costly.
expensive. yes.
And you won't forgive yourself, right? Yeah. We've seen cases where they're like, oh no, my parents got this letter that they would buy the house cash out of and I'm like, they just sold the property 20% under market because they were taken advantage.
A little bit of work will go a long way. In the case of caregiving, check the Google reviews, check the Yelp reviews, but also I've had people call me and ask for references from other clients that 100%. I provide. Totally fine. Obviously, I go to the clients and say, are you okay with me using you as a reference? I'm not going to give any phone numbers away, but I will provide references, ask a lot of questions. A lot of us, what we're doing is similar. The biggest difference is between the caregivers. Interview the caregivers. So,
I agree.
so some agencies will just say, great, Monday morning, someone's coming out to see you. What I'll do is I'll say, look, if you're comfortable with this and have the time, give me a couple days next week and I'll come out and I'll come with 2 caregivers. You tell me who you like better.
Oh, that is fantastic.
And the reason I do it, the hardest part, I tell everyone, I'm matching you on the schedule. I'm matching you on their skill set. But the one that's the hardest is personality. Right? I can't, I never know if this caregiver is going to talk too much, talk too little. You never know. Everybody's different, right? So
that is a great point.
It's okay to say, interview the caregivers. And it's also okay if you have a caregiver for a couple weeks to call the agency and say, she was good for a couple weeks, but we want to try somebody else. It's totally fine. You just never know exactly what's going to work.
That is very important.
And the caregivers know that as well. They're not going to be offended or hurt by it.
But that's a great point, because you need them to feed each other's personality, right? And have a good experience.
And you never, like I said, you never know. It ranges. If someone's coming into your house for just a few hours, it may not be the end of the world. But when a caregiver's there 7 or 8 hours a day, if you don't get along with their personality, little things might start to bother you, right?
So I always say, it's interesting with the reviews, right? We love reviews. We love great reviews, right? And we all get them. I think that when someone is happy and content with the services they get, we have to be the ones asking them for a testimonial or a review, because they're just happy, but they don't take the time to write the review. When somebody did a bad job, the first thing they do is put a bad review, right?
Yep.
And like everything, I always say, when you go to an Airbnb, don't you check the reviews? Go read some reviews. Go ask for recommendations. Talk with the people that are your advisors, your estate planning attorney, your financial advisor, people that you know and trust. Ask for recommendations and then read those reviews about them.
Totally
Don't
agree.
be stuck with somebody that doesn't have a good review, because you're putting the people you love the most in their hands.
Now, the last thing that, when it comes to what separates us as caregiving agencies, so obviously there's me and my policies, there's my caregivers, which is probably the most important part. The last one is, are they following the rules and the laws? Do they have insurance updated? So it's okay for people to ask me, can you send me proof of your insurance?
Oh, that's
right?
great.
The state does ask for insurance when I got my license, and they've never asked since then. I could have canceled it.
Oh my God, how funny.
But, as a franchise, Home Helpers is a national franchise. We're all over the country. The franchise actually follows up with me to make sure I have insurance. So there is some benefit to going for kind of the known names that are franchised, because they have more checks and balances, whereas the mom and pops may not. Regardless, it's totally okay to call any of them and say, please send me your proof of insurance. And you want to make sure that any caregiving agency is licensed. Legally, they have to be. You want to make sure they have a liability insurance, and you want to make sure they have workers' comp insurance. Those are the big ones.
Which areas do you cover, and how do they contact you if they want to know more?
So I have 2 offices. I have one that's in Laguna Hills, and I have another one that's in Palos Verdes. But the office doesn't really matter. What really matters is, where are my caregivers?
Yes.
And I have caregivers all over Orange County and the south end of LA County.
Oh,
so
that's perfect.
I cover everything. I have 2 clients in Yorba Linda, where we are today.
Okay.
I have a number of clients on probably a line from there, Whittier, Torrance, to the South Bay, and then all the way down to the San Clemente area.
Oh, that's perfect.
So pretty much all of that. And that's because I have I've got a lot of caregivers that cover that area. And it's more important where they live. They're not coming from my office to someone's house. They're coming from their home or from a client. So I cover just about everywhere in Southern California. And my phone number is 949-482-CARE. C-A-R-E. So 949-482-2273.
Okay, and they can call you, set up a consultation.
So that phone number actually is both, by the wonders of technology, that's both an office line and a text line.
Okay.
So if you text it, it goes to an app to my phone. So these days, a lot of people don't want those phone calls. I tell a lot of people, just text me. Text me a question. How much do you charge? And we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they can reach out to me anytime. And I'll answer any questions.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Dwight. It was such a pleasure having you. And as always, we're here to provide you knowledge and insider information on how to take care of family, real estate, and financial estate planning decisions. So Pleasure having you, Dwight.
Thank you
and
so
we'll
much.
see you soon.
Thank you.